The rain fell hard on the streets of Vienna that evening. People rushed past with umbrellas trying to stay dry as they hurried home from work. The streetlights created golden pools on the wet pavement. Cars splashed through puddles. Everyone seemed to have somewhere warm to go. Everyone except Elena Volkov. She stood outside the glass doors of Restaurant Adler, one of the finest dining places in the city. Through the windows, she could see well-dressed people sitting at tables covered with white cloth. Waiters in black suits carried plates of food that smelled wonderful. A large grand piano sat in the corner of the main dining room, black and shining under the soft lights. Elena was 19 years old, but she looked older. Her face was thin and pale. Dark circles sat under her eyes. Her brown hair hung in damp strings around her shoulders. She wore an old gray coat that had holes in the pockets. Her shoes had worn through at the bottom, and her feet were wet from walking in the rain. She had not eaten a real meal in 3 days. Her stomach hurt from hunger. Her hands shook, not just from the cold but from weakness. She had been living on the streets for almost 2 years now, and each day felt harder than the last. But Elena had something that most people could not see just by looking at her. She had a gift. A talent that had once made her famous across Europe when she was just a child. She could play the piano like very few people in the world could play. She took a deep breath and pushed open the heavy glass door. The warmth of the restaurant hit her immediately. The smell of roasted meat and fresh bread made her stomach twist with hunger. Several people near the entrance turned to look at her. Their eyes moved from her wet hair down to her worn shoes. Their expressions changed from curiosity to discomfort to disgust. A tall man in a perfect black suit walked toward her quickly. His name was Victor, and he was the head waiter. His face showed clear displeasure as he looked at Elena. "I am sorry, but you cannot be here," Victor said. His voice was polite but firm. "This is a private establishment." Elena swallowed hard. Her throat felt dry. "Please," she said quietly. "I am not here to cause trouble. I want to ask something." "We do not give money to beggars," Victor said, moving to guide her back toward the door. "There is a shelter 3 blocks from here. They can help you." "I do not want money," Elena said, her voice stronger now. "I want to play your piano. Just one song, in exchange for some food. Anything you have. Even leftovers." Victor stopped. He stared at her for a moment, then a small smile appeared on his face. Not a kind smile, an amused one. Behind him, a couple at a nearby table had heard Elena's words. They whispered to each other and chuckled softly. "You want to play our piano?" Victor repeated, as if he could not believe what he had heard. "Yes," Elena said. "I can play well. I promise I will not damage it. Just one piece of music. Then I will leave." More people were watching now. The whispers spread through the dining room. A man in an expensive suit laughed out loud. "This should be entertaining," he said to his dinner companion. Victor shook his head. "I think it is better if you just leave now. We cannot have a—" "Victor, wait," an elderly woman's voice cut through the noise. Everyone turned to look. Mrs. Adler, the owner of the restaurant, walked slowly toward the entrance. She was 78 years old with white hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a simple black dress and a pearl necklace. Her eyes, behind thin glasses, were sharp and bright. She had been sitting at her usual table in the corner where she ate dinner every evening while watching over her restaurant. She had seen the thin young woman come in from the rain. She had heard her unusual request. "Mrs. Adler," Victor said, "I was just explaining to this young woman the toe." "I heard what she asked," Mrs. Adler said. She looked at Elena carefully, not with disgust or pity, but with real attention. "You want to play the piano for food?" "Yes, ma'am," Elena said. Her legs felt weak. She was not sure how much longer she could stand. "Just one piece. Then I will go. I promise." "And you believe you can play it well enough to earn a meal?" Mrs. Adler asked. "I believe I can play it well enough that you will want to hear more," Elena answered. Several people laughed at this. The confidence in her words seemed ridiculous coming from someone who looked like she did. One woman in diamonds shook her head and turned back to her salmon. Mrs. Adler studied Elena's face for a long moment. Something in the young woman's eyes caught her attention. Behind the hunger and exhaustion there was something else. Something that reminded Mrs. Adler of someone from long ago. "Very well," Mrs. Adler said finally. "You may play one piece. If it is terrible, you must leave immediately. If it is acceptable, I will give you soup and bread from the kitchen. If it is good—" She paused. "We will see." Victor looked shocked. Mrs. Adler, surely. It is my restaurant, Victor, the old woman said gently but firmly. And my piano. Let her play. Elena felt tears start to form in her eyes, but she forced them back. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much, Mrs. Adler gestured toward the piano. Go ahead then. We are all waiting. Elena walked across the restaurant on unsteady legs. Every eye in the room followed her. The conversations had mostly stopped. People watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to annoyance to amusement. Many of them expected this to be a disaster, something funny to talk about later. The piano was beautiful. It was a Steinway grand piano, perfectly maintained. Elena could see her reflection in its glossy black surface. She pulled out the bench and sat down slowly. Her wet coat dripped water onto the floor. She placed her hands on the keys. They were cold. She could feel them shaking. When had she last played a real piano? 6 months ago? Longer? She had played on cheap keyboards in train stations, on broken pianos in abandoned buildings. But nothing like this in so long. Behind her, someone laughed again. This is absurd, a man muttered. She probably cannot even read music. Elena closed her eyes. She took a deep breath. She thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The years of training as a child, the endless hours of practice, her mother's gentle encouragement, the competitions she had won, the concerts she had played, the applause of thousands, and then the darker memories. Her mother's death, the cruel teacher who had taken over her training, the psychological torture disguised as instruction, the day she had finally run away, choosing freedom over fame, dignity over success. She had lost everything, her career, her reputation, her home, but she had never lost this gift, this ability to take the feelings in her heart and pour them out through her fingers onto ivory keys. She opened her eyes. Her hands stopped shaking, and Elena began to play. She chose Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. It was one of the most difficult pieces ever written for piano. It required not just technical skill, but deep emotional understanding. It was a piece about struggle and beauty, about darkness and light. It was a piece that told a story. It was her story. The first notes rang out into the dining room, clear and pure. They were soft at first, almost questioning. Then they grew stronger. Her fingers moved across the keys with impossible speed and precision. The melody began to build, layer upon layer of sound, creating something rich and complex. The effect on the room was immediate. A woman who had been lifting a fork to her mouth froze mid-movement. A man who had been laughing stopped with his mouth open. Victor, who had been walking toward the kitchen, stopped in his tracks. The music filled every corner of the restaurant. It was not just sound. It was emotion made audible, pain and hope twisted together, loneliness and strength dancing as partners. Every note carried weight. Every phrase told a truth. Elena's fingers flew across the keys. Despite her hunger and weakness, they did not miss a single note. Years of muscle memory took over. Her body remembered what her mind sometimes tried to forget. She had been born to do this. This was what she was made for. The technical difficulty of the piece was staggering. Her left hand created a foundation of deep, rolling chords while her right hand spun out melodies that seemed to float in the air. She moved from pianissimo passages so quiet they were almost whispers to fortissimo moments that made the crystal glasses on the tables vibrate. But it was not just the technical skill that held everyone frozen. It was the feeling she put into every measure. You could hear her story in the music. The loss, the betrayal, the night sleeping in doorways, the hunger, the cold, the moments when she wanted to give up. And underneath it all, the stubborn refusal to let the darkness win completely. In the kitchen, two cooks who had been arguing about a sauce recipe stopped talking. They moved toward the door to listen. The dishwasher turned off his machine. One by one, the staff emerged from the back to hear what was happening. At her corner table, Mrs. Adler sat very still. Tears ran down her wrinkled cheeks. She had not cried in years, not since her husband had died. But this music broke through the walls she had built around her heart. It reminded her of Hans, her late husband, who had been a violinist. He had played with such passion, such beauty. He had understood that music was not just notes on a page. It was life itself transformed into sound. This young woman, this hungry girl in wet clothes, she understood the same thing. The music built toward its climax. Elena's whole body moved with the piece. She leaned into the powerful chords. She pulled back for the tender moments. For a long moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The silence was so complete that you could hear the rain still falling outside, the ticking of the clock on the wall, the quiet hum of the lights. Then someone began to clap. It was the professional musician David Chen, who had been dining near the window. He stood up from his table, his hands coming together in slow, deliberate applause. His face showed pure amazement. Another person joined in. Then another. Within seconds, the entire restaurant was on its feet. The applause grew louder and louder. It was not polite restaurant clapping. It was the kind of thunderous ovation usually reserved for concert halls. For virtuosos, for masters. Elena lifted her head slowly. She looked around in confusion. People were applauding her. Actually applauding her. Some were crying. The man who had laughed at her was staring with his mouth open, unable to believe what he had just heard. The woman in diamonds had her hand over her heart, tears streaming down her face. Mrs. Adler walked slowly toward the piano. She moved carefully, as if approaching something sacred. When she reached Elena, she took the young woman's thin, cold hands in her own warm ones. "What is your name, child?" Mrs. Adler asked softly. "Elena," she answered. Her voice sounded strange in her own ears. "Elena Volkov." David Chen, the musician, gasped. He pushed through the crowd toward the piano. "Elena Volkov?" he repeated. "The Elena Volkov? The child prodigy?" Elena looked down. "I was," she said quietly. "A long time ago." "You vanished," David said. 3 years ago. "There were rumors, but no one knew what happened to you. Everyone assumed." He trailed off, looking at her worn clothes, her thin frame. Mrs. Adler squeezed Elena's hands gently. "Victor," she called out. "Tell the kitchen to prepare a full meal, and bring it to my private table." "But Mrs. Adler," Victor protested weakly. "She said she only wanted—" "She will have a proper meal," Mrs. Adler said firmly. "Soup, salad, the roasted chicken with vegetables, fresh bread with butter, and whatever dessert she would like. Now, please." Victor nodded and hurried to the kitchen, still looking stunned by what he had just witnessed. Elena tried to stand, but her legs would not hold her. The adrenaline that had carried her through the performance was fading. The weakness and hunger came rushing back. She started to fall. David Chen caught her before she hit the floor. He lifted her easily. She weighed almost nothing. "Let me help you," he said gently. They guided her to Mrs. Adler's private table in the corner. Someone brought a soft blanket to wrap around her shoulders. Someone else brought hot tea. The other diners slowly returned to their meals, but they kept glancing over at the corner table. The mood in the entire restaurant had changed. Something extraordinary had just happened. Elena sipped the tea slowly. The warmth spread through her body. She could not remember the last time something had tasted so good. Mrs. Adler sat across from her, studying her face. "How long since you have eaten?" she asked. 3 days, Elena admitted. "I had a little bread 3 days ago." The old woman's expression tightened with concern. "And before you came here tonight, what was your plan?" Elena shrugged. "I did not have one. I've been walking all day. I saw your restaurant. I saw the piano. I thought it was worth trying." "You were willing to play Rachmaninoff for soup," David said, sitting down at the table as well. He shook his head in disbelief. "Do you know how many pianists in the world can play that piece? Really play it the way you just did?" "It does not matter," Elena said quietly. "No one wants to hear me play anymore." "That is clearly not true," Mrs. Adler said, gesturing to the room full of people who were still watching them. Victor arrived with the food. He placed it in front of Elena carefully, his earlier disapproval completely gone. He looked at her with something like awe now. "Please," he said. "Enjoy." Elena looked down at the plate. The roasted chicken was golden brown. The vegetables were perfectly cooked. The bread was still warm. It was the most beautiful meal she had ever seen. She picked up her fork with shaking hands. She cut a small piece of chicken and put it in her mouth. The taste exploded on her tongue. She closed her eyes. A tear rolled down her cheek. "Slowly," Mrs. Adler said gently. "Your stomach is not used to rich food. Take your time." Elena nodded and forced herself to eat slowly, even though every part of her wanted to devour everything on the plate immediately. Mrs. Adler and David exchanged a look. Both of them were thinking the same thing. This young woman was not just talented. She was extraordinary. And she was starving on the streets of Vienna. Something had gone terribly wrong. "Elena," Mrs. Adler said after a few minutes, Where are you staying tonight? Elena swallowed her food before answering. I'm not sure yet. There is a place under a bridge where No, Mrs. Adler interrupted firmly. That will not do. Not anymore. Elena looked up, confused. I do not understand. You will stay here tonight, Mrs. Adler said. I have a small apartment above the restaurant. It is not much, but it has a bed and heat and a bathroom. You will sleep there. I cannot, Elena said immediately. You have already given me so much. This, Milo, was earned by your performance, Mrs. Adler said, but the room is a gift. One old woman to a young one who reminds me very much of someone I loved dearly. Elena felt more tears coming. She was so tired of crying, so tired of being weak, but the kindness in Mrs. Adler's eyes broke something inside her. Some wall she had built to protect herself. Why are you being so kind to me? Elena whispered. You do not know me. Mrs. Adler smiled. It was a sad smile, but genuine. Perhaps that is exactly why. Because I do not know your story yet. I only know that you have a gift that should not be wasted, and that you asked for food in exchange for beauty. That tells me something about who you are. David Chen leaned forward. Elena, if you are willing, I would like to help you as well. I'm a concert promoter. I know people, good people, people who could help you get back into the music world properly, with protection this time, with support. Elena looked between them, these two strangers who suddenly wanted to help her. Part of her wanted to trust them, but another part, the part that had been hurt and betrayed, was screaming at her to run, to disappear back into the streets where at least she knew what to expect. I need time to think, she said finally. Everything is happening very fast. Of course, Mrs. Adler said. Tonight you rest, you eat. You sleep in a warm bed. Tomorrow we can talk more. There is no pressure, no tricks. Just an old woman who would like to help if you will let her. Elena took another bite of her food. Her mind was spinning. An hour ago she had been standing in the rain, wondering if she would survive another week on the streets. Now she was eating the best meal she had had in years, and two people were offering her help she did not know if she could accept. The restaurant around them continued its evening service. But everything felt different now. The woman who had asked to play for food had become someone else in their eyes. Not a beggar, not a nobody, but an artist, a musician, someone worthy of respect. As Elena ate slowly under the watchful eyes of Mrs. Adler and David Chen, she did not know what would happen next. She did not know if she could trust these people. She did not know if she was ready to face the world that had broken her. But for the first time in a very long time, she felt something she had almost forgotten, a tiny spark of hope, small and fragile but there, flickering in the darkness like a candle that refused to go out. Outside, the rain continued to fall on the streets of Vienna. But inside Restaurant Adler, something new was beginning. Something that would change not just Elena's life, but the lives of everyone who had witnessed what happened when a hungry young woman asked to play the piano for food, and then reminded them all what true music could sound like. Elena followed Mrs. Adler up the narrow stairs behind the restaurant kitchen. Each step felt difficult. Her legs were weak from hunger and exhaustion. The warm meal sat heavy in her stomach, and her body was not used to feeling full anymore. David Chen had said goodbye at the bottom of the stairs, promising to return tomorrow to talk more. Elena was not sure if she believed him. The stairs led to a small hallway with two doors. Mrs. Adler opened the second one and flipped on a light switch. The room was simple but clean. There was a single bed with a thick quilt, a small table with a chair, a wooden wardrobe, and a window that looked out over the street. Another door led to a tiny bathroom. It is not much, Mrs. Adler said, but it is warm and safe. The bathroom has hot water. There are towels in the cabinet and some old clothes in the wardrobe that might fit you. They belonged to my niece when she lived here years ago. Elena stood in the doorway, unable to move. She stared at the bed like it was something from a dream. A real bed, with clean sheets, and a pillow. I do not know what to say, Elena whispered. Then say nothing, Mrs. Adler replied gently. Just rest. Tomorrow we will talk. Tonight you sleep. She moved toward the door, then paused. Elena, the door locks from the inside. You are safe here. No one will bother you. I promise. After Mrs. Adler left, Elena stood alone in the small room. She listened to the old woman's footsteps fade down the stairs. Then she turned the lock on the door. The click sounded very loud in the quiet room. She walked slowly to the bed and sat down on the edge. The mattress was soft. She pressed her hand against it, testing to make sure it was real. Everything that had happened in the last few hours felt impossible, like she had fallen asleep under a bridge somewhere and this was all a dream she would wake up from soon. But it was real. The bed was real. The room was real. The meal still warm in her stomach was real. Elena started to cry. Not quiet tears this time, but deep sobs that shook her whole body. She cried for all the nights she had slept in cold doorways, for all the times she had been too hungry to sleep, for all the fear and loneliness and desperation she had carried for so long. She cried until she had no tears left. Then she went to the bathroom. The sight of the shower made her want to cry again. She turned on the water and waited for it to get hot. When steam began to fill the small room, she undressed slowly. Her clothes were damp and dirty. She could not remember the last time she had been truly clean. The hot water felt like a miracle against her skin. She stood under it for a long time, letting it wash away days and weeks and months of living on the streets. The dirt ran down the drain in brown streams. She used the soap and shampoo, scrubbing until her skin turned pink. When she finally stepped out, she felt almost like a different person. She wrapped herself in a towel and went to the wardrobe. Inside she found several dresses, some pants, and sweaters. They were old-fashioned but good quality. She chose a soft nightgown and put it on. It was too big, but it was clean and warm. Elena looked at herself in the small mirror on the wall. Her face was still too thin. Her eyes still had dark circles. But without the dirt and wet hair, she looked more like herself again. More like the girl she used to be before everything fell apart. She climbed into the bed and pulled the thick quilt over her. The sheet smelled like lavender. The pillow was so soft. She closed her eyes, expecting to fall asleep immediately. But sleep did not come. Her mind would not stop. It kept replaying the evening over and over. Walking into the restaurant, Victor's disgust, Mrs. Adler's unexpected kindness, sitting at the piano, playing for all those people, the applause, the food, the offer of help, and then the fear crept in. The voice in her head that told her this could not last, that she did not deserve this, that something would go wrong, that Mrs. Adler would change her mind, that this was all some kind of trick. She thought about Professor Dmitri, her old teacher, the man who had taken her in after her mother died. He had seemed kind at first, too. He had promised to make her the greatest pianist in the world, and then slowly he had become cruel. His teaching methods had turned into torture. Every mistake meant hours of extra practice. Every imperfection meant screaming and humiliation. He had isolated her from everyone, controlled every part of her life, made her believe she was worthless without him. When she was 17, Elena had finally understood that staying with him would destroy her completely. So she had run. In the middle of the night with only the clothes on her back. She had left behind her career, her reputation, everything. She had chosen survival over success. But survival on the streets had been harder than she imagined. She had no money, no friends, no family. The music world had forgotten her quickly. Those who remembered thought she had quit because she could not handle the pressure. Some said she had never been that good anyway, that she had been overhyped as a child. Only Elena knew the truth. She had not quit. She had escaped. Now lying in this warm bed, she wondered if she had made a mistake accepting Mrs. Adler's help. What if the old woman was like Professor Dmitri? What if there were conditions she had not mentioned yet? What if tomorrow brought new demands, new expectations, new ways to be controlled? Elena turned over in the bed, trying to quiet her thoughts. But they would not stop. They never did. Finally, exhaustion won. Her body was too tired to stay awake any longer. She fell into a deep sleep, the first real sleep she had had in weeks. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window. For a moment, she could not remember where she was. Then it all came back. The restaurant. The piano. Mrs. Adler. The room. Elena sat up quickly. What time was it? How long had she slept? There was a small clock on the table. It read 10 in the morning. She had slept for almost 12 hours. She got out of bed and went to the window. The street below was busy with people going about their day. The rain had stopped. The sun was shining. It was a beautiful morning. There was a soft knock on the door. Elena froze. Her heart started to beat faster. Elena? It was Mrs. Adler's voice. Are you awake? I have brought you some breakfast. Elena unlocked the door and opened it slowly. Mrs. Adler stood in the hallway holding a tray. On it was a pot of tea, A cup, a plate with eggs and toast and fruit, and a small vase with a single yellow flower. "Good morning," Mrs. Adler said with a smile. "I hope you slept well." "I did," Elena said. "Thank you. But you did not have to bring me breakfast." "I know," Mrs. Adler said, "but I wanted to. May I come in?" Elena stepped aside and Mrs. Adler entered the room. She set the tray on the small table. "Please eat while it is hot. We can talk while you have your breakfast." Elena sat down at the table. The food looked wonderful. She picked up a fork and started to eat slowly, remembering Mrs. Adler's advice from last night about not eating too fast. Mrs. Adler sat on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap. "Elena, I want to talk to you about something. But first, I want you to know that you are welcome to stay in this room for as long as you need. There are no conditions. If you want to leave today, you can leave. If you want to stay, you can stay. This is not a trap." Elena looked up from her food. "Why are you doing this? You do not even know me." Mrs. Adler was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My husband Hans was a musician, a violinist. He was very talented, but he was also very gentle. Too gentle for the music world, perhaps. He was used by people who only cared about money and fame. They pushed him to perform when he was sick. They scheduled him for too many concerts. They treated him like a machine, not a person." She paused, her eyes distant with memory. "One day, when he was 52 years old, he collapsed during a concert. His heart gave out. The doctors said it was from stress and exhaustion. He died 2 days later." "I am sorry," Elena said quietly. "After Hans died, I promised myself something," Mrs. Adler continued. "I promised that if I ever met another musician who was being hurt by the system, I would help them if I could. Last night when you walked into my restaurant, I saw something in your eyes. The same thing I used to see in Hans's eyes. A love for music mixed with pain. Talent mixed with suffering." Elena put down her fork. Her appetite was suddenly gone. "I do not want to talk about my past." "That is fine," Mrs. Adler said gently. "You do not have to tell me anything you do not want to tell. But I want to make you an offer. A real offer, not charity. I need someone to play piano in my restaurant during dinner service. The man who used to do it moved away last month. I have been looking for a replacement. Would you be interested in the job?" Elena stared at her. "You want to pay me to play piano?" "Yes, 6 evenings a week. You would play from 7 to 10. I will pay you a fair wage. And you can continue to live in this room. The rent will come out of your pay, but what is left will be yours." "Why would you do this?" Elena asked. "You heard me play one time." "One time was enough," Mrs. Adler said. "Elena, what you did last night was not just good. It was extraordinary. My customers are still talking about it this morning. 3 people called already to ask when you would play again. You are good for my business. But more than that, you deserve a chance to rebuild your life, to do what you love without being destroyed by it." Elena felt that dangerous spark of hope again. What if I am not good enough? What if last night was just, I do not know. "Look." Before Elena could answer, there was another knock on the door downstairs. They heard Victor's voice calling up. "Mrs. Adler? That man from last night is here. David Chen. He says he has an appointment." Mrs. Adler looked at Elena. "Do you want to see him?" "You do not have to if you are not ready." Elena thought about it. Part of her wanted to say no, to hide in this room forever, but another part, the part that had made her walk into the restaurant last night, wanted to hear what David Chen had to say. "I will see him," she said. They went downstairs together. David Chen was waiting in the restaurant. It was between breakfast and lunch service, so the dining room was empty except for a few staff preparing tables. He stood up when he saw Elena. "Good morning," he said. He looked at her more carefully in the daylight. "You look better than last night. I hope you rested well." "I did," Elena said. "Thank you." They sat at one of the tables. Mrs. Adler brought them coffee and then left them alone to talk. David leaned forward, his expression serious. "Elena, I spent half the night researching your story. I found old articles about you. Reviews of concerts you played as a child. Videos online. You were not just good. You were considered one of the most promising young pianists in Europe." "That was a long time ago," Elena said, looking down at her coffee cup. "It was 3 years ago," David corrected gently. "You are only 19. You still have your whole career ahead of you." "But I also found something else." I found articles about your teacher, Professor Dmitry Volkov, about allegations made by other students, about investigations into his teaching methods. Elena's head snapped up. What kind of allegations? Emotional abuse, psychological manipulation, creating environments of fear and control. 3 other students have come forward in the last 2 years. They are building a case against him. Elena felt her heart racing. I did not know that. I have not been following the news. Elena, what happened to you? David asked quietly. Why did you run away? Why did you end up on the streets instead of going to another conservatory or finding another teacher? She was quiet for a long time. Part of her wanted to keep her secrets, to protect herself by staying silent, but another part was tired of carrying everything alone. Professor Dmitri was my mother's teacher, she said finally. When she died, he offered to train me. For free. He said it was to honor her memory. My mother had been a good pianist, but not a great one. She always said I had more talent than she ever did. She was proud of me. Elena's voice got quieter. At first, Professor Dmitri was kind. He taught me so much. But after a few months, things changed. He started getting angry when I made mistakes. He would yell at me for hours. He told me I was wasting my talent, that I was disappointing my mother's memory, that without him I was nothing. She took a shaky breath. He controlled everything. What I ate, when I slept, who I could talk to. He cut me off from everyone. He said other people would distract me from my music, that only he understood what I needed. The practice sessions got longer and longer, sometimes 12 hours a day. If I complained, he told me I was weak, that real artists sacrificed everything. David's expression was grim. That is abuse, Elena. That is not teaching. I know that now, Elena said. But then I thought maybe he was right. Maybe I was weak. Maybe I did need to work harder. But one day I realized that I hated the piano. Me. I had loved it my whole life, and suddenly I hated it. I hated the sight of it. And I knew that if I stayed, he would kill that love completely. He would kill everything good in me. So you ran, David said. So I ran, Elena confirmed. In the middle of the night. I did not have money. I did not have friends. I did not know where to go. I was afraid he would find me if I went to another music school. So I just disappeared. I thought it would be temporary, that I would figure something out. But it has been almost 2 years and I never figured it out. Until last night. David was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Elena, I want to help you. But I need you to understand something. Getting back into the music world will not be easy. Professor Dmitri still has influence. He has told people you are unstable, that you quit because you could not handle success. Some people will believe him. Then maybe I should not try, Elena said. Maybe I should just work here at the restaurant and forget about everything else. Is that what you want? David asked. Elena thought about the question. She thought about last night sitting at the piano playing Rachmaninoff. She thought about how it had felt to make that music, to pour her heart out through her fingers, to connect with people through sound. No, she admitted, that is not what I want. But I am scared. Being scared is okay, David said. I am not asking you to decide anything today. I am just asking you to think about it. I know people who can help. Good people. People who have helped other musicians escape bad situations. I can connect you with them. But only if you want me to. Mrs. Adler came back to the table. Elena has a job here for as long as she wants it, she said. That gives her stability. A safe place to live. Time to decide what she wants to do next. There is no rush. Elena looked between these two people who yesterday had been strangers. Now they were offering her things she had not dared to hope for. Safety, work, a chance to rebuild. Can I think about it? Elena asked David. About the music career part? Of course, he said. Take all the time you need. I will come by again in a few days to check on you. If you decide you want my help, I will be here. If you decide you do not, I will respect that. After David left, Elena helped Mrs. Adler with some small tasks around the restaurant. Folding napkins, setting tables. Simple work that kept her hands busy, while her mind tried to process everything. That evening at 7 o'clock, Elena sat down at the piano in Restaurant Adler for the first time as an employee. She wore one of the dresses from the wardrobe upstairs. Mrs. Adler had trimmed her hair and helped her look presentable. The restaurant filled up quickly. Word had spread about the mysterious pianist from the night before. People came hoping to hear her play again. Elena felt nervous as she looked at the crowd, but it was a different kind of nervous than she had felt in years. This was not fear. This was anticipation. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play. Not Rachmaninoff this time. Something gentler. Chopin's nocturnes. Music that floated through the room like a soft breeze. As she played, she realized something. The music sounded different than it had with Professor Dmitri, lighter, freer, because now she was playing for herself. Not to prove anything, not to meet impossible standards, not to avoid punishment, just to make something beautiful. For the first time in 3 years, Elena Volkov began to remember why she had fallen in love with music in the first place. And for the first time in a long time, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could find her way back to it on her own terms. The road ahead was uncertain. There would be challenges and difficult decisions. But tonight, in this warm restaurant surrounded by people who appreciated what she could do, Elena took the first real step toward building a new life. A life where music was joy again, not pain. Where talent was celebrated, not weaponized. Where she could be both strong and vulnerable, both artist and human being. It was just the beginning. But it was a good beginning. And sometimes that was enough. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks that felt like a lifetime to Elena. She fell into a routine at Restaurant Adler. Every morning she woke up in her small room above the restaurant. She ate breakfast with Mrs. Adler in the kitchen. Then she spent the afternoons practicing on the piano when the restaurant was closed. In the evenings, she played for the dinner guests from 7 until 10. At first, her fingers had been stiff and slow. 2 years away from serious practice had left its mark. But muscle memory was a powerful thing. Each day she got a little better, a little faster, a little more confident. The pieces she had once played perfectly as a teenager came back to her, note by note. The restaurant's business grew. Every night the dining room was full. People came from all over Vienna to hear the mysterious pianist. They made reservations weeks in advance. Mrs. Adler had to hire 2 more waiters to handle the crowds. Elena slowly started to gain weight. Her face filled out. The dark circles under her eyes faded. Her hair grew shiny and healthy. She bought new clothes with her first paycheck, simple dresses and comfortable shoes. Nothing fancy, but they were hers, earned by her own work. But the best change was internal. Something inside Elena was healing. The constant fear that had lived in her chest for 2 years was starting to fade. She still had bad dreams sometimes. She still jumped when people raised their voices. But those moments became less frequent as the days passed. Mrs. Adler never pushed her to talk about her past. She never asked invasive questions. She simply provided a safe space and let Elena heal at her own pace. They would sit together in the kitchen after the restaurant closed, drinking tea and talking about simple things. Food, weather, books, the kind of normal conversation Elena had not had in years. David Chen came by every few days. He never pressured Elena about returning to the professional music world. He just checked in, made sure she was doing okay, and told her stories about concerts and musicians. Slowly, Elena began to trust him. She began to believe that maybe he really did want to help without expecting anything in return. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after Elena had started working at the restaurant, she was practicing a particularly difficult passage from a Liszt piece. She was frustrated because her left hand kept stumbling over the same group of notes. "Try slowing it down," a voice said from behind her. Elena jumped and spun around. A tall man with silver hair stood in the doorway of the restaurant. He was maybe 60 years old, wearing an expensive suit. His face was kind but serious. "I am sorry," the man said. "I did not mean to startle you. The door was open. I heard you playing and—" He gestured toward the piano. "That passage is one of the hardest in all of Liszt. Even professionals struggle with it." "Who are you?" Elena asked. Her heart was still beating fast. "My name is Alessandro Moretti," the man said. "I am a conductor. I lead the Vienna Symphony Orchestra." Elena's eyes went wide. She knew that name. Everyone in the classical music world knew that name. Maestro Moretti was one of the most respected conductors in Europe. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I came to hear you play," Moretti said simply. "I have heard many stories in the past few weeks about a young woman who plays piano like an angel. A friend of mine dined here last week and could not stop talking about you. So I came to hear for myself. I was just practicing, Elena said. I am not performing right now. The restaurant is closed. I know, Moretti said. That is why I came now. I wanted to hear you play without an audience. Without the pressure of performance. Just you and the music. Elena did not know what to say. She felt nervous and exposed. This man was famous, important. What if she disappointed him? Would you play something for me? Moretti asked gently. Anything you like. I will just listen. Elena hesitated. Then she turned back to the piano. She thought about what to play. Not the list. Not something she was still struggling with. She chose something she knew by heart, something she could play even in her sleep. She played Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, the third movement. It was fast and powerful and emotional. Her fingers flew across the keys. All the frustration she had been feeling about the Liszt piece poured into this one. She played with fire and passion and precision. When she finished, there was silence. Elena turned slowly to look at Maestro Moretti. He was staring at her with an expression she could not read. How old are you? He asked. 19, Elena answered. 19, he repeated softly. And you play like someone who has lived 100 years. Where did you train? Elena's expression closed off. That was a long time ago. It does not matter now. Moretti studied her face. You are Elena Volkov, are you not? The child prodigy who disappeared, Elena did not answer, but her silence was answer enough. I thought so, Moretti said. I saw you play once when you were 14. A competition in Berlin. You were extraordinary then. But now, he shook his head in wonder. Now you are something else entirely. The technique is still there, but there is depth now. Real emotion. Real understanding of the music. What do you want from me? Elena asked. She was tired of people recognizing her, tired of being connected to that past life. I want to offer you an opportunity, Moretti said. In 6 weeks, I am conducting a special concert with the Vienna Symphony. We have invited a famous pianist from Russia to be our soloist, but he canceled yesterday due to illness. We need a replacement. I would like that replacement to be you. Elena felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. You want me to perform with the Vienna Symphony Orchestra? Yes, it would be at the Musikverein, one of the most prestigious concert halls in the world. We would perform Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto No. 1. It is a magnificent piece, perfect for your style. I cannot, Elena said immediately. I am not ready. I have been practicing alone for 3 weeks. That is not enough time to prepare for something like that. I disagree, Moretti said. You could play that piece right now if you had to. Yes, you would need practice with the orchestra. Yes, you would need to refine some details. But the talent is there. The understanding is there. Elena, opportunities like this do not come often. If you say yes, it could change everything for you. Or it could destroy everything, Elena said. If I fail in front of that audience, I will never recover. And I have worked too hard to build this small life. I am not willing to risk it. Moretti nodded slowly. I understand your fear. But let me ask you something. Is this really the life you want? Playing in a restaurant every night? It is a good life. An honest life. But is it enough for someone with your gift? The question hit Elena hard because she had been asking herself the same thing. Every night as she played for the dinner guests, part of her longed for more. For bigger stages, for orchestras, for the chance to play the great concertos with professional musicians backing her up. But another part of her was terrified of that world, terrified of being hurt again. I need time to think, Elena said. Of course, Moretti said. He pulled a card from his pocket and placed it on the piano. This is my contact information. Think about it. Talk to people you trust. But please give me your answer within 1 week. We need time to rehearse if you say yes. After he left, Elena sat at the piano for a long time staring at his card. Her hands were shaking again, but not from hunger this time, from fear and excitement mixed together. That evening, before dinner service started, Elena told Mrs. Adler about Maestro Moretti's visit. The old woman listened carefully, her face thoughtful. What do you want to do? Mrs. Adler asked when Elena finished. I do not know, Elena admitted. Part of me wants to say yes, but I'm so scared. Scared of what exactly? Mrs. Adler asked. Elena thought about the question. Scared that I will fail. Scared that I am not as good as everyone thinks. Scared that I will get pulled back into that world and lose myself again. Scared that Professor Dmitri will find out and... I do not know. Hurt me somehow. Those are all valid fears, Mrs. Adler said. But let me ask you this. If you say no, will you regret it? Yes, Elena answered without hesitation. I think I will regret it for the rest of my life. Then you have your answer, Mrs. Adler said gently. But what if everything goes wrong? Elena asked. What if everything goes right? Mrs. Adler countered. Elena, you have spent 2 years protecting yourself from being hurt. That was necessary. You needed that time to survive. But now you have a chance to do more than survive. You have a chance to truly live again, to share your gift with the world in the way it was meant to be shared. Elena felt tears forming in her eyes. I am not brave enough. You are the bravest person I know, Mrs. Adler said firmly. You walked into my restaurant and asked to play for food when you had nothing. You played your heart out in front of strangers. You left an abusive situation even though it meant losing everything. Elena, bravery is not the absence of fear. It is doing the right thing even when you are terrified. That night, Elena barely slept. She tossed and turned in her bed, thinking about Maestro Moretti's offer. She imagined herself on stage at the Musikverein. Sometimes the image was glorious. Other times it was a nightmare where she froze up and could not play a single note. The next day, David Chen came by for his regular visit. Elena told him about the offer. He was thrilled. This is exactly what I have been hoping for, he said. Elena, Maestro Moretti is known for being selective. You make it sound simple, Elena said. It is not simple, David admitted, but it is necessary. Elena, other students have come forward about Professor Dimitri's abuse. You are not alone. If you told your story publicly, it would help them. It would help future students. And it would free you from this fear you carry. Elena shook her head. I cannot. I am not strong enough for that. Not yet, David said. But maybe soon. For now, just focus on the concert. Make your decision about that first. The rest will come later. Over the next few days, Elena practiced with renewed intensity. She played Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto No. 1 over and over from memory. She knew the piece well. She had performed it once when she was 15 at a competition. Back then, she had played it technically well but without real depth. Now she understood the music in a way she had not been capable of then. On the 5th day after Maestro Moretti's visit, Elena made her decision. She called the number on his card. Maestro Moretti, she said when he answered. This is Elena Volkov. I have thought about your offer. And? His voice was cautious but hopeful. I accept, Elena said. I will play with your orchestra. But I have some conditions. Name them, Moretti said. I want David Chen to be involved in all contracts and arrangements. I want Mrs. Adler to be given VIP tickets to the concert. And I want complete control over any press or publicity. No interviews without my permission. No photographs without my approval. Done, Moretti said immediately. All of those things are very reasonable. Elena, you will not regret this. When can you start rehearsals with the orchestra? As soon as you are ready, Elena said. After she hung up, Elena sat very still. She had done it. She had actually said yes. Terror and excitement flooded through her in equal measure. Mrs. Adler came into the room, having heard Elena's side of the conversation. You said yes? I said yes, Elena confirmed. Mrs. Adler hugged her tightly. I am so proud of you. That evening, Elena played at the restaurant with a different energy. Her music was brighter, more alive. The customers noticed. Several people commented that she seemed happier. But at closing time, something happened that changed everything. A man walked into the restaurant just as Victor was locking the front door. He was tall and thin, with a sharp face and cold eyes. His hair was mostly gray. He wore an expensive overcoat. Elena saw him from across the room. Her blood turned to ice. Her hands started shaking. All the color drained from her face. It was Professor Dmitri Volkov. Hello, Elena, he said. His voice was smooth and controlled. I heard you have been playing piano again. I thought it was time we talked. Mrs. Adler immediately moved between Elena and the professor. Who are you? She demanded. I am Elena's teacher, Dmitri said. Or I was before she ran away like a child throwing a tantrum. I have come to bring her home. I am not going anywhere with you, Elena said. Her voice shook, but she forced the words out. I do not belong to you. You are making a mistake, Dmitri said. His eyes were hard. You have been playing in this little restaurant, pretending to be something you are not. But you cannot escape your destiny, Elena. You were meant for greatness, and only I can give that to you. She does not need you, Mrs. Adler said firmly, and you need to leave now. Dmitri ignored her. He kept his eyes fixed on Elena. I heard about the concert with Maestro Moretti. Do you really think you are ready for that? Without my guidance? You will fail, Elena. You will embarrass yourself in front of everyone, and then you will come crawling back to me begging me to train you again. Something inside Elena snapped. All the fear she had been carrying suddenly transformed into anger. Pure burning anger, get out, she said. Her voice was quiet but filled with steel. Get out of this restaurant. Get out of my life. You do not control me anymore. You never will again. Elena, Dmitri started. No, Elena interrupted. She stood up from the piano and walked toward him. Her legs felt steady. Her hands had stopped shaking. You are not my teacher. You were my abuser. You manipulated me. You isolated me. You made me hate the thing I loved most in the world. But I survived you. I got away from you. And I have built a new life. A life playing in a restaurant, Dmitri sneered. That is not worthy of your talent. It was worthy of saving my life, Elena shot back. This restaurant gave me shelter when I had none. These people gave me kindness when you gave me only cruelty. And now I am going to play with one of the best orchestras in Europe. Not because of you. In spite of you. Dmitri's face turned red with anger. You ungrateful child. After everything I did for you, you did nothing for me, Elena said. Her voice was rising now. You did things to me. You hurt me, and you hurt others too. I know about the other students. The ones who have come forward. The investigation. You are going to face consequences for what you have done. For the first time, Dmitri looked uncertain. You have no proof, he said. I have my voice, Elena said. And I have the truth. And that is all I need. Victor had called the police during this exchange. 2 officers entered the restaurant now. Is there a problem here? One of them asked. This man is harassing my employee, Mrs. Adler said. We would like him to leave. The officers looked at Dmitri. Sir, you need to go. Dmitri stared at Elena for a long moment. His expression was full of rage and something else. Something that looked almost like fear. He had expected her to cower, to submit, to come back under his control. But she had not. She had stood up to him. This is not over, he said quietly. Yes, it is, Elena replied. It has been over since the night I walked away from you. I just did not realize it until now. The police escorted Dmitri out of the restaurant. Everyone stood in silence for a moment after he left. Then Elena's legs gave out. She collapsed into a chair, shaking all over. But this time she was shaking from relief, not fear. Mrs. Adler knelt beside her. Are you okay? I think so, Elena said. She started to laugh a little wildly. I just stood up to him. I actually did it. You were magnificent, Mrs. Adler said. David Chen, who had arrived during the confrontation, sat down across from Elena. That took incredible courage, he said. Elena, I know this is hard, but I think you should consider telling your story publicly, before the concert. Take control of the narrative before Professor Dmitri can spread more lies about you. Elena looked at him. She was still shaking, but something had changed inside her. A weight she had been carrying for years felt lighter. Okay, she said. I will do it. I will tell my story. That night, lying in her bed, Elena felt different, stronger. For the first time since she was 15 years old, she felt like she was in control of her own life. She had faced her abuser and had not backed down. She had reclaimed her voice. The concert was still weeks away. There would be rehearsals and challenges and moments of doubt. But Elena knew now that she could handle it. She was not the broken girl who had walked into Restaurant Adler a month ago. She was becoming someone new, someone who had survived the worst and was ready to build something better. Tomorrow she would start telling her story. But tonight she slept peacefully, knowing that she had already won the most important battle. The battle for her own freedom. The morning after her confrontation with Professor Dmitri, Elena woke with a strange feeling. It took her a moment to identify it. She felt lighter, as if something heavy she had been carrying had finally been set down. She got out of bed and looked at herself in the mirror. The same face looked back at her, but something in her eyes was different. They looked clearer, more determined, less haunted. There was a knock on her door. Elena, Mrs. Adler's voice called. There is someone here to see you. A journalist. Her name is Maria Fisher. She says David Chen told her about you. Elena's heart jumped. This was happening quickly. Too quickly. But she had agreed last night to tell her story. There was no backing out now. She got dressed and went downstairs. A woman in her 40s sat at one of the restaurant tables. She had short dark hair and warm brown eyes. She stood up when Elena entered. Elena Volkov, she said. I am Maria Fisher. I write for the Vienna Tribune. David Chen told me your story, or part of it. I would like to hear it from you if you are willing to share it. Elena sat down across from her. Her hands were shaking slightly. What did David tell you? He told me you were a child prodigy who disappeared from the music world 3 years ago, Maria said. He told me you are about to make a comeback performance with the Vienna Symphony. And he told me there is a story behind your disappearance. A story about abuse and survival. Elena took a deep breath. If I tell you this story, will you print it exactly as I say it? Without changing things? Without making it more dramatic than it is? I will print the truth, Maria said. That is all I have ever done. Elena, I have reported on abuse in the classical music world before. I know how common it is. And I know how hard it is for victims to speak up. If you trust me with your story, I will treat it with respect. Elena looked at Mrs. Adler, who stood nearby. The old woman nodded encouragingly. Okay, Elena said. I will tell you everything. For the next 2 hours, Elena talked. She told Maria about her mother, who had been a pianist and had trained her from childhood. She talked about how much she had loved music as a little girl, how it had felt like magic to make beautiful sounds with her fingers. She described her mother's death when she was 15, the grief that had nearly destroyed her, and then Professor Dimitri's offer to take over her training, how grateful she had been, how he had seemed like a savior at first. Then she described how things had changed, the long practice sessions that stretched for 12 or 14 hours, the verbal abuse when she made mistakes, the way he had isolated her from other people, the psychological manipulation, the constant criticism that made her doubt herself, the way he made her feel like she was nothing without him. He never hit me, Elena said carefully, but he did not need to. His words were weapons. He knew exactly what to say to break me down, to make me feel worthless, to make me believe I deserved his treatment. Maria listened carefully, taking notes. Her expression was serious but compassionate. When did you decide to leave? When I realized I had stopped loving music, Elena said. That was when I knew I had to go. Music had been my whole life. It was the thing that connected me to my mother. It was how I understood the world. And he was killing it inside me. So I ran. I did not plan it. I just left one night with nothing. I thought I would figure something out. But you ended up homeless, Maria said gently. Yes, I had no money, no family, no friends he had not driven away. I was too scared to go to another music school because I thought he would find me, so I survived however I could. It was the hardest 2 years of my life, but they were also the most free I had been since my mother died. And then you came to Restaurant Adler, Maria said. And then Mrs. Adler saved my life, Elena said, looking at the old woman with gratitude. She gave me shelter and work and kindness. She gave me a safe place to heal. And slowly I started to love music again. Not the way Professor Dimitri taught me to play. Not performing to meet impossible standards, but playing because it was beautiful, because it made me happy. Maria finished writing and looked up. Elena, do you know there are 3 other students who have filed complaints against Professor Dimitri? There is an ongoing investigation. Your testimony could be very important. I know, Elena said. David told me. And I am ready to give it. I was not ready before. But I am now. What changed? Maria asked. Elena thought about the question. He came here last night. He tried to intimidate me, to make me feel small again, but I realized he only has power if I give it to him, and I am done giving him anything. He took enough from me already. Maria smiled. That is a very powerful realization. Elena, I am going to write this story. It will be published tomorrow morning. Are you prepared for what might happen? There will be attention. Some people will support you. Others might doubt you or defend Professor Dimitri. I know, Elena said, but staying silent has not protected me. Maybe speaking up will. The article was published the next day. The headline read, The Prodigy Who Disappeared. Elena Volkov speaks out about abuse in classical music. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Elena's phone, which Mrs. Adler had helped her get the week before, rang constantly. Some calls were supportive. Music teachers and performers reached out to tell her she was brave. Former students of other abusive teachers shared their own stories. But there were also negative responses. Some people questioned why she had waited so long to speak up. Others suggested she was lying for attention. A few said she was ungrateful and had wasted her talent. The hardest responses came from people in the music world who defended Professor Dmitri. They said he was a brilliant teacher whose methods were strict but effective. They claimed Elena was just weak and could not handle serious training. David Chen helped Elena manage the flood of attention. Do not read the negative comments, he advised. Focus on the people who understand. Focus on preparing for your concert. The rehearsals with the Vienna Symphony Orchestra began. Elena was nervous the first day she walked into the rehearsal hall. The orchestra members were all professional musicians, much older and more experienced than her. What if they thought she did not belong there? But Maestro Moretti introduced her warmly. This is Elena Volkov, he told the orchestra. She is our soloist for the Tchaikovsky concerto. I have heard her play and I promise you she is extraordinary. Let us make beautiful music together. The first rehearsal was rough. Elena was not used to playing with an orchestra. She had to learn to listen for her cues while also maintaining her own interpretation. There were moments when she came in too early or too late. Moments when she played too loud or too soft. But Maestro Moretti was patient. He worked with her carefully, explaining how to connect with the orchestra. You are not playing against them, he said. You are playing with them. It is a conversation, not a competition. By the third rehearsal, things started to click. Elena began to feel the rhythm of working with so many musicians at once. She learned to watch Maestro Moretti's conducting for guidance. She learned to blend her sound with the strings and woodwinds and brass. The orchestra members began to respect her. They could hear that she was genuinely talented, not just famous. During breaks, some of them came up to talk to her. They told her they had read her story. Several shared their own experiences with difficult teachers. What you did was brave, an older violinist named Anton told her. When I was young, I had a teacher like yours. But I never spoke up. I just quit music for 10 years. I admire that you are choosing to reclaim it instead of letting him take it from you forever. As the rehearsals continued, Elena's confidence grew. She was getting stronger every day, both musically and emotionally. She was eating well, sleeping well, and practicing intensely. Her technique improved. Her interpretation deepened, but she also had moments of doubt. Late at night, she would lie in bed and imagine the concert. What if she froze on stage? What if her fingers stopped working? What if everyone who said she was not good enough was right? Mrs. Adler would find her in these moments, sitting at the piano in the dark restaurant, playing quietly. Cannot sleep? The old woman would ask. Too many thoughts, Elena would answer. Mrs. Adler would sit with her, just being present. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence. Her steady presence helped calm Elena's fears. 2 weeks before the concert, Elena received an unexpected phone call. It was from one of the other students who had filed complaints against Professor Dmitri. Her name was Sophie. I read your article, Sophie said. I just wanted to say thank you. It helped me feel less alone. I thought I was the only one who could not handle his teaching style. But reading your story made me realize it was not about being weak. It was about him being abusive. How long were you his student? Elena asked. 2 years. I left 6 months ago. But I am still dealing with the trauma. I cannot play piano anymore without having panic attacks. My therapist says it might take years to fully heal. Elena felt a wave of sadness. I am so sorry that happened to you. It is not your fault, Sophie said. It is his. But Elena, I want you to know something. The fact that you are performing with the Vienna Symphony after everything he did to you gives me hope. It makes me think that maybe one day I can play again too, not professionally, but just for myself, just for joy. After they hung up, Elena sat quietly for a long time. She thought about Sophie and the other students who had suffered. She thought about all the young musicians who might be suffering right now, trapped with abusive teachers thinking they had no way out. She made a decision. After the concert, she would do more than just tell her story. She would try to make actual change. Maybe she could start a foundation or support group for musicians escaping abuse. Maybe she could help create better protection systems in music schools. But first, she had to get through the concert. The final week before the performance was intense. Elena rehearsed with the orchestra every day. Maestro Moretti pushed them all to excellence. He was demanding but never cruel. He gave constructive criticism mixed with encouragement. The second movement needs more emotion, he would say. Elena, think about the saddest moment of your life. Then play from that place. But do not let it overwhelm the music. Channel it. Transform it into beauty. Elena understood what he meant. The second movement of the Tchaikovsky concerto was slow and melancholic. It needed deep feeling. She thought about her mother's death, about the long nights on the streets, about the hunger and cold and loneliness, and she poured all of that into the music, but in a way that felt cathartic rather than destructive. Yes, Maestro Moretti said, his eyes shining, exactly like that. 3 days before the concert, the dress rehearsal took place. This was the final practice, performed exactly as the real concert would be, in the actual concert hall. Elena walked into the Musikverein for the first time. It was one of the most famous concert halls in the world. The main hall was covered in gold decoration. The ceiling was painted with beautiful art. Rows and rows of red velvet seats faced the stage. This is where you will play, Maestro Moretti said, gesturing to the grand piano on stage. This is where you will show the world who Elena Volkov really is. The dress rehearsal went well. Elena made a few small mistakes, but nothing serious. The orchestra sounded magnificent. The acoustics of the hall made every note ring out clearly and beautifully. Afterward, Maestro Moretti gathered everyone together. That was excellent, he said. Now go home, rest, take care of yourselves, and in 3 days we will create something unforgettable. The night before the concert, Elena could not eat. Her stomach was twisted in knots. She tried to practice, but her hands were shaking too much. She went for a walk through Vienna, trying to calm her nerves. When she returned to the restaurant, she found Mrs. Adler sitting at one of the tables with a photo album open in front of her. Come sit, Mrs. Adler said. I want to show you something. Elena sat down. The album was filled with old photographs. Pictures of a younger Mrs. Adler with a handsome man who must have been her husband, Hans. This was taken the night before his first major concert, Mrs. Adler said, pointing to one photo. Look at his face. You can see how nervous he was. He barely slept that night. He was convinced he would forget all the music and embarrass himself. What happened? Elena asked. He walked out on stage, and the moment he put his violin under his chin, all the fear disappeared, Mrs. Adler said. He told me later that the music took over, that his body knew what to do even when his mind was panicking. That is what will happen to you tomorrow. The fear will be there until you start playing. Then the music will take over. Elena looked at the photographs. Hans had a kind face, gentle eyes. She could see why Mrs. Adler had loved him. Do you miss him? Elena asked quietly. Every day, Mrs. Adler said, but I am grateful for the time we had. He taught me that music is not about perfection. It is about connection, about touching people's hearts. That is what you are going to do tomorrow, Elena. You are going to connect with that audience in a way they will never forget. That night, Elena finally managed to sleep. She dreamed of her mother. In the dream, her mother was sitting in the audience at the Musikverein, smiling at her. When Elena woke up, she felt calm. The day of the concert arrived. Elena spent the morning quietly. She ate a light breakfast. She practiced for an hour, just running through the difficult passages to keep her fingers warm. She tried on her concert dress, a simple but elegant black gown that David Chen had helped her choose. In the afternoon, Mrs. Adler helped her do her hair and makeup. You look beautiful, the old woman said. But more importantly, you look strong. You look ready. David Chen drove Elena to the concert hall. They arrived 2 hours before the performance would begin. Backstage, Elena had a small dressing room. She sat there alone for a while, breathing deeply, preparing mentally. Maestro Moretti knocked on her door. May I come in? Yes, Elena said. He entered and sat down across from her. How are you feeling? Terrified, Elena admitted. What if I fail? What if I let everyone down? Elena, let me tell you something, Maestro Moretti said. In my 40 years of conducting, I have worked with hundreds of soloists. Some were technically perfect but emotionally empty. Others were passionate but sloppy. Very few had both perfect technique and deep emotion. You have both. You are going to walk out on that stage and you are going to move people to tears. Not because you play all the notes correctly, though you will, but because you understand what the music means. Because you have lived it. Elena felt tears forming. "Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for trusting me enough to do this," Maestro Moretti replied. He stood up. "It is almost time. The orchestra is warming up. The audience is arriving. Are you ready?" Elena thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The years of training as a child, her mother's love and encouragement, the darkness of Professor Dimitri's abuse, the desperate nights on the streets, the kindness of Mrs. Adler, the support of David Chen, the bravery it had taken to tell her story. She thought about Sophie and the other students who were counting on her to show them it was possible to survive and thrive after abuse. She thought about all the young musicians who needed to see that your past does not have to define your future. "Yes," Elena said, standing up. "I am ready." She walked toward the stage, her heart pounding but her steps steady. The sound of the audience talking and the orchestra tuning filled her ears. This was it. This was her moment to reclaim everything that had been taken from her. This was her moment to fly. Elena stood in the wings of the stage, listening to the orchestra tune their instruments. The sound was chaotic but somehow comforting. It meant that real musicians were out there, preparing to create something beautiful with her. Through a gap in the curtain, she could see the audience filing into the concert hall. The Musikverein was filling up quickly. Row after row of seats were occupied by people dressed in their finest clothes. She spotted Mrs. Adler being shown to her seat in the front section. The old woman looked elegant in a dark blue dress with her pearl necklace. David Chen was there too, sitting a few rows back. He caught Elena's eye through the curtain and gave her a thumbs up. She managed a small smile in return. The hall was almost full. Nearly 2,000 people would be watching her play tonight. The thought made her dizzy. 5 minutes, a stagehand whispered to her. Elena closed her eyes and took several deep breaths. Her hands were cold. Her heart was racing. But underneath the nervousness there was something else. Excitement. Anticipation. This was what she had been born to do. After 3 years of running and hiding, she was finally coming home to herself. The lights in the hall dimmed. The audience noise faded to silence. Maestro Moretti walked out onto the stage. The audience applauded politely. He bowed and turned to the orchestra, waiting for them to settle. Then he looked toward the wings where Elena stood. He gave her a small nod. It was time. Elena walked out onto the stage. The applause grew louder as the audience saw her. She wore the simple black gown that made her look both young and elegant. Her hair was pulled back neatly. She looked nothing like the hungry, desperate girl who had walked into Restaurant Adler 6 weeks ago. She walked to the piano and bowed to the audience. The applause continued. She sat down on the piano bench and adjusted it slightly. She placed her hands in her lap and looked at Maestro Moretti. He raised his baton. The orchestra lifted their instruments. Elena placed her fingers on the keys. For just a moment, time seemed to stop. The hall was completely silent. 2,000 people held their breath. Maestro Moretti's baton came down. The orchestra began with the famous opening chords. Big, powerful, dramatic sounds that announced something important was about to happen. Then came Elena's entrance. The piano joined the orchestra with a cascade of notes that rushed down the keyboard like water over stones. And from the very first notes, Elena knew it was going to be okay. Her fingers knew what to do. They moved across the keys with confidence and precision. All the hours of practice, all the years of training had prepared her for this moment, but more than that, she felt free. For the first time in years, she was playing without fear, without someone standing over her, ready to criticize every small mistake, without the weight of impossible expectations crushing her. She was just playing music, making beauty, sharing her gift with people who had come to listen. The first movement of the Tchaikovsky concerto is long and difficult. It has moments of incredible speed and power. It has delicate passages that require perfect control. It has sections where the piano and orchestra chase each other, trade melodies, blend together in harmony. Elena played it all with growing confidence. She was completely present in the music. When the piece called for power, she gave it power. When it needed gentleness, she played with the softest touch. She listened to the orchestra, responding to their sound, creating a real conversation between her piano and their instruments. In the audience, Mrs. Adler sat with tears streaming down her face. She could hear her late husband Hans in Elena's playing. That same combination of technical brilliance and deep emotional truth. That understanding that music was not just notes on a page but a language of the heart. David Chen watched with amazement. He had known Elena was talented, but seeing her here, on one of the world's greatest stages, playing with such maturity and confidence, he realized she was not just talented. She was destined for greatness. The first movement built to its powerful conclusion. Elena's hands flew across the keyboard in the final virtuosic passages. The orchestra surged behind her. Then the final chords rang out, strong and triumphant. There was a brief pause, then the audience began to applaud. But Maestro Moretti quickly raised his hand for silence. The second movement was about to begin, and applause between movements was not traditional in classical music. The audience quieted. The second movement was very different. It was slow and lyrical, deeply emotional. The orchestra played a gentle melody while the piano added delicate decoration around it. This movement required Elena to show a different side of her artistry. Not power or speed, but sensitivity and feeling. Elena thought about what Maestro Moretti had said during rehearsal. To play from the saddest moment of her life. She thought about her mother, about sitting by her bedside in the hospital, holding her hand as she died, about the grief that had nearly destroyed her, about the loneliness of the years that followed. But she also thought about survival, about resilience, about the fact that sadness does not have to be the end of the story. Pain can be transformed into something beautiful if you have the courage to face it. She played all of that into the second movement. Every note carried weight. Every phrase told a story. The music was heartbreaking and healing at the same time. In the audience, people who had come just for an evening's entertainment found themselves genuinely moved. Some cried openly, others sat in awed silence. When the second movement ended, the silence in the hall was profound. No one wanted to break the spell. Then, without pause, the third movement began. This movement was fast and joyful. After the sadness of the second movement, it felt like emerging from darkness into light. Like choosing to dance even when life has been hard. Like refusing to let pain have the final word. Elena played with abandon. She smiled as her fingers raced across the keys. This was pure joy. Pure music, pure life. She was not playing to prove anything or to meet anyone's expectations. She was playing because it made her happy. Because it was beautiful. Because she could. The orchestra matched her energy. Maestro Moretti conducted with sweeping gestures, his whole body moving with the music. The brass section shone in their big moments. The strings created lush harmonies. Every musician in the orchestra was giving their best. Inspired by the young pianist who had survived so much to be here. The final section of the third movement is one of the most exciting passages in all of piano literature. It requires incredible speed and stamina. Elena had practiced it thousands of times over the years. But tonight it felt effortless. Her hands knew exactly where to go. The notes poured out of her like water from a fountain. The piece built to its conclusion. Faster and faster, louder and louder. The piano and orchestra together creating a wall of glorious sound. Then came the final chords. Powerful, decisive, complete. The last note rang out into the hall and faded to silence. For a moment, no one moved. The silence was so complete you could hear people breathing. Elena sat at the piano, her hands still resting on the keys, her chest heaving from the physical exertion of the piece. Maestro Moretti stood with his baton raised, frozen in his final gesture. Then the audience exploded. The applause started like thunder. Within seconds, everyone was on their feet. 2,000 people standing, clapping, shouting. The sound was overwhelming. It echoed off the golden walls and painted ceiling of the Musikverein, filling every corner of the magnificent hall. Elena stood up from the piano, shaking. She bowed deeply. The applause grew even louder. Maestro Moretti came to her and took her hand, raising it high. The orchestra was applauding too, tapping their bows on their music stands in the traditional musician's gesture of respect. The ovation continued for several minutes. Elena bowed again and again. People in the audience were crying, smiling, calling out. This was not polite appreciation. This was genuine, overwhelming enthusiasm. They had witnessed something special, something rare, a performance that transcended mere technique and became pure art. Finally, the applause began to fade. Elena left the stage, her legs trembling. Backstage, she collapsed into a chair, overwhelmed. Had that really just happened? Had she really done it? Maestro Moretti came backstage beaming. Elena, that was magnificent. In all my years, I have rarely heard the Tchaikovsky played with such passion and understanding. You were absolutely brilliant. The orchestra members filed past, congratulating her. Anton, the older violinist, stopped to shake her hand. Your mother would be very proud, he said quietly. Mrs. Adler came backstage next, moving as quickly as her old legs would allow. She hugged Elena tightly. My dear child, she whispered. That was the most beautiful thing I have ever heard. David Chen arrived with several other people. Elena, I need to introduce you to some people. This is Christina Weber from the Berlin Philharmonic. This is James Morrison from the New York Music Festival. They all want to talk to you about future performances. In a daze, Elena met and talked with important people from the music world. They praised her playing. They offered her concerts and recording contracts. They wanted to schedule performances months and years in advance. But Elena was careful. She remembered David's advice. She did not agree to anything immediately. She just listened, thanked them for their interest, and said she would consider their offers carefully. The crowd eventually thinned. Elena changed out of her concert dress and into comfortable clothes. She felt exhausted but also exhilarated. Her hands ached from playing so intensely, but it was a good ache. The ache of having given everything she had. Before she left the concert hall, she walked back out onto the empty stage. The audience was gone. The orchestra had packed up and left. The hall was quiet again. She stood there for a moment, looking at the rows of empty seats, remembering how they had looked filled with people. You did it, a voice said. Elena turned. Maestro Moretti stood in the wings, watching her. I knew you would, he continued. From the moment I heard you play in that restaurant, I knew you were special. Thank you for giving me this chance, Elena said. I will never forget it. This is just the beginning, Maestro Moretti said. Elena, you have a great career ahead of you. But please be careful. The music world can be cruel. Make sure you surround yourself with people who care about you as a person, not just as a performer. I will, Elena promised. She left the concert hall with Mrs. Adler and David Chen. Outside, the Vienna night was cool and clear. Stars were visible between the buildings. Normal people walked past, going about their evenings, unaware that something extraordinary had just happened inside the famous hall. They went back to Restaurant Adler. Even though it was late, Mrs. Adler insisted on making them a meal. You need to eat, she told Elena. You just did something that took enormous energy. Your body needs food. They sat in the quiet restaurant, the three of them, eating simple food and talking about the evening. Elena kept replaying moments from the performance in her mind. The feeling of her fingers on the keys, the sound of the orchestra around her, the thunderous applause. What happens now? She asked finally. That is up to you, David said. You have offers from all over the world. You could perform with major orchestras. You could make recordings. You could teach. You could do anything you want. What do you want to do? Mrs. Adler asked gently. Elena thought about the question. A few months ago, she had wanted nothing more than to hide from the music world forever, to play in a small restaurant and live a quiet, safe life. But tonight had reminded her of why she had fallen in love with music in the first place. The joy of creating something beautiful, the connection with an audience, the feeling of channeling something larger than herself through her hands. I want to keep performing, she said slowly, but on my own terms. I want to choose my teachers and mentors carefully. I want to be surrounded by people who respect me as a person, and I want to help other young musicians who are struggling with abuse. I do not want what happened to me to happen to others. Then that is what we will do, David said. I will help you choose the right opportunities. We will build your career slowly and carefully. No exploitation. No impossible pressure. Just good music with good people. And you will always have a home here, Mrs. Adler added. Whether you are performing at the Musikverein or at Carnegie Hall, you will always have this room upstairs and a place at my table. Elena felt tears forming again. Happy tears this time. I do not know how to thank you both. You saved my life. You saved your own life, Mrs. Adler said firmly. We just gave you a safe place to do it. The courage came from you. The next morning, the reviews of the concert were published. Every major newspaper in Vienna covered it. The headlines were glowing. Young pianist delivers. Performance of lifetime at Musikverein. Elena Volkov's triumphant return to classical music. From the streets to the stage, a story of survival and talent. Elena read them all with disbelief. The critics praised her technique, her emotion, her interpretation. Some mentioned her story, the article about Professor Dimitri's abuse. Many said that her experience had given her playing a depth that most young pianists lacked, but not all the responses were positive. Professor Dimitri released a statement to the press. He called Elena's accusations lies from an ungrateful student and claimed her success was despite, not because of, leaving his guidance. Elena read his statement and felt nothing, no fear, no anger, just a sort of sad pity for a man so broken that he could not see his own cruelty. The investigation into Professor Dimitri continued. With Elena's testimony added to the others, the case grew stronger. Several music schools announced they would no longer employ him. His reputation, which he had valued above everything, was crumbling. But Elena did not focus on him. She focused on moving forward. In the weeks after the concert, she met with Sophie and the other former students who had accused Professor Dimitri. Together, they started planning a foundation to support young musicians escaping abusive situations. They would provide legal help, counseling, emergency housing, and connections to healthy teachers and schools. "We cannot change what happened to us," Sophie said at their first meeting, "but we can make sure future students have better options." Elena accepted a few carefully chosen performance opportunities. She would play with the Berlin Philharmonic in 3 months. She had been invited to a prestigious music festival in France. But she did not accept everything. She made sure she had time to rest, to practice, to live a normal life. And she continued to play at Restaurant Adler 2 evenings a week. It had become her anchor. The place where she was not Elena Volkov, the famous pianist, but just Elena, a young woman who worked at a restaurant and played piano for people having dinner. 6 months after her triumphant concert, Elena sat at the piano in the restaurant one quiet Tuesday evening. The dinner service was light. Only a few tables were occupied. She played Chopin, soft and gentle, background music for conversation. A young woman approached her during a break. She looked nervous. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you Elena Volkov?" "Yes," Elena said. "I am a piano student," the girl said. She looked about 16. "I have been studying with a teacher who is very demanding. Sometimes I think he is too harsh. But I do not know if I am just being weak. I read your story and I wondered, how did you know when it was too much? How did you know when to leave?" Elena looked at this girl and saw herself at that age. Confused, scared, trapped but not quite sure if she was imagining it. "If you are asking that question," Elena said gently, "it probably means something is wrong. Trust your instincts. And know this, there are good teachers out there. Teachers who will push you to be excellent without destroying you. You do not have to accept abuse to be great." The girl's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. After she left, Elena sat at the piano for a moment thinking. Then she began to play again. Not for an audience, not for fame or success. Just for the pure joy of making music, she played Mozart. Light and playful. The notes danced in the air. In the kitchen, Mrs. Adler heard the music and smiled. In his office across town, David Chen was meeting with concert promoters, building Elena's career carefully and ethically. In their homes, Sophie and the other survivors were slowly healing, encouraged by Elena's example. And somewhere in his apartment, Professor Dimitri sat alone, his career ending, his legacy turning to ash. Elena did not know or care what he was doing. She had moved beyond him. She had taken back her life, her music, her future. She had transformed her pain into purpose, her suffering into strength. The girl who had once begged to play for food had become a woman who played for joy. The survivor had become a thriver. The victim had become a voice for others, and the music played on, beautiful and free, exactly as it was always meant to be. Elena Volkov had come home. Not to a place, but to herself. And that was the greatest triumph of all. Outside the restaurant, Vienna lived its evening life. People walked past, unaware of the quiet miracle happening inside, unaware that in that small restaurant a young woman was proving something important, that broken things could be healed, that stolen joy could be reclaimed, that even after the darkest nights, morning eventually comes, and when it does, there is always music.